Well, welcome to the Two Tokens podcast, and delighted today to be joined by Aljosja from Doc Lab and Juliun from Stability, and really looking at the commercial application of how blockchain technology being used, predominantly in the supply chain industry. But before we get stuck in it, Aljosja, can you just give us a bit of background to yourself, how you got involved in DLTs and blockchains, and a little bit about Doc Lab, if that's okay, please.
Sure. Aljosja, I'm a co-founder and CTO of Doc Lab. Doc Lab is a 100% subsidiary of the Port of Rotterdam, and we basically develop digital solutions based on emerging technologies like blockchain to solve the challenges in supply chains and the energy transition.
What do you mean by energy transition? What, transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So more efficient use of peer-to-peer power sharing, for example, but also provenance of sustainable fuels. These kind of areas are very relevant for the port, and we have developed solutions for that.
Okay, that's great. We'll come back on a couple of different examples, but Juliun, can you just a little bit about yourself? Where you come from, what you do, and just perhaps you give us a brief intro to Stability.
Sure. Great to see everyone. I'm Juliun Bravon. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Stability. I've been in blockchain for about 11 years, and today Stability is we're a layer one public global blockchain that has no native cryptocurrencies.
Hang on, Juliun. What do you mean layer one? Does that mean there's another layer?
Yeah, basically it means just like a native primary sovereign blockchain. We don't depend on another blockchain to operate. So basically it means that we're a public blockchain with no other dependencies that are out there. We do not require users to have cryptocurrencies to use the network, which is different than other common networks. And yet we still operate in the public space.
Okay. And so what in particular are you doing? Because obviously the Port of Rotterdam, they have some commercial needs. You're a I think the Americans call you a geek. Is that a fair sort of terminology?
That's fair terminology. Yeah, I'm based here in Los Angeles. Most of the team is based in the US and Canada, some in Singapore as well. We have found ourselves primarily in the supply chain space, just as a matter of fact. We came in, we met up with Singapore government, with the IMDA, got really well connected with the trade trust team there, who was doing a lot in digitizing trade documents. And from there, we got sucked into some of the fintech space, banking, track and trace, serialization, all of these common sectors. And we've seen, as of today, a majority of our use cases are coming from the supply chain sector, specifically because they want to use a blockchain, but they don't want to pay a couple of $1 million for a private instance, and they don't want to rely on cryptocurrencies for a public instance.
Okay, why bother with blockchain? SQL servers can do most of what a blockchain can do. Why bother with this new technology? People get really confused and think you're trying to sell them a bit of Bitcoin 9 times out of 10.
I mean, that's a great question. And I think that really the way that I like to explain this is that cryptocurrencies have value. I think we all see Bitcoin as value, right? Why do they have value? Well, a lot of the value that they have today is not because they themselves have value. It's because the networks they operate on have those valuable properties. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are applications that run on blockchain. So when you say Bitcoin is valuable because it's trustless, I don't have to rely on a third-party company, that's a blockchain property. When you say things like, oh, it's secure, that's a blockchain property. The fact that it's not as expensive to use, that's a blockchain property. And so these are critical pieces that when you plug them together have a massive impact in things like authentication, privacy-based features, ensuring that for very, very low cost, or my very own IT team can identify, secure, and prove certain things have occurred on the network itself, like transferring documents, for example. But I would
Okay.
leave this to Aljosja.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I add to that, I mean, SQL Server is great for data, but it is not very good for solving digital transfer of ownership and making sure that there's only one unique copy of a single asset, or that can be a coin, that can be whatever, on this planet, because then it would require one single SQL database running the whole planet. So while I think SQL databases in general are very good for a reality for the users within that make use of that database, sharing that reality with other parties is much more difficult, and blockchain basically solves this challenge by giving an infrastructure that is globally accessible to everybody, at least public blockchains.
Okay, so you've done some really interesting work, with the Port of Rotterdam, probably one of the most important ports, certainly here in Europe, on this data transfer, this information of data, using technology as opposed to bits of paper, with the bills of lading. Can you explain a little bit more? Because you're involved with the Dutch government in terms of looking to hopefully get some legislation around this. On perhaps you can just explain initially, what do we mean by digital transfer of ownership?
Well, the thing is that when you have currently the physical paper of the bill of lading in your possession, so you're holding that document that basically gives you the entitlement to decide what to do with the cargo. So you don't become an owner. It's not like you are a legal owner of the cargo, but you're entitled to do whatever you want with the container that holds the cargo. And that makes that document extremely valuable, because you have basically the possession of the container and what's inside of that container. And that is being used as collateral. And it's a very important foundation for letters of credit. Banks are willing to provide a letter of credit, provided that they can take control of the cargo at any given point in time when you don't pay. So it's not really about the data on the bill of lading. For us, the data is in effect totally not relevant. It's about the value that is represented with that data that can be transferred in the form of a token from one wallet to another wallet. Just like people are passing on the paper version of that document from one person to the other person, but much faster, much more secure, because how do people currently identify whether a bill of lading is original or not? They start feeling whether there's an indent of a signature, or, well, in some cases they say, well, it says so, it's original. So this digitization through tokenization is really making it faster, more secure, but in order to do that, technology-wise, that these challenges have been solved basically already in 2009, when Satoshi published his paper on blockchain and Bitcoin, basically, because Bitcoin is nothing else than a token. But from a legal perspective, digital transfer of ownership is in most countries not allowed. The UK passed a law, MLETR law, in 2023. Great, a very important step, because a lot of maritime contracts are British law. But you also need other countries in order to accept that digital equivalence or the digital version as a paper equivalent. So we're doing basically Electronic Trade Document Act, as in the UK. We are now doing that in the Netherlands based on MLETR compliant legislation.
Okay, so
about to go to our parliament this year.
Right. So Julian, you've either been rehearsing this or the two. You two sound like you're talking the same sort of language. You're talking about transparency. You're talking about transferring of information. This word token, people get a little bit confused because most people think of a token historically is it allows you to do something. So you have a token to maybe go on a ride, or you have a token and it'll perhaps buy you a coffee or something like that. Or a token could be to go gambling in a casino. But here we're talking about a token being used as it's almost like a package of digital information. It doesn't have any value necessarily. It's not an up and down in price, but it's very valuable to notify maybe something's happened. Is that a fair way from a techie, geeky point of view to how you might see a token?
The way that I would describe it is that effectively when we say tokenize and when we're referring to token, this would apply to all tokens, not just financial ones, but documents as well. I would call a token just a program. It's a program that's installed and is operating on a blockchain. Now, if you were to install that and run that on a SQL server, it could be modified or hacked or break or something could go wrong. The difference is when you install a program like this, which we call a smart contract, onto a blockchain, it would inherit the properties.
What's this smart contract? Because all the lawyers used to tell me they're not smart and they're not legally enforceable. But that seems to have changed now, I understand.
It just means it's a program that's installed on the software, on the blockchain itself. I'm sorry. It's a program installed on the blockchain. So a token is a program installed on the blockchain. So that's exactly the same thing. So a token is a smart contract, is a program that's installed on the network itself. And the cool thing about that is when you install that program, it now inherits the properties of the network. So these things that we've been discussing here, where it can now be proven, it can be trustless and all these interesting factors, it makes it far more secure and far more useful as a result. And so that's really what we're referring to when we talk about tokenization. We're just saying we're going to write a set of rules based around this document, and we're going to install it in the network itself, in the blockchain itself. And now those rules cannot be violated. And not only can they not be violated, you yourself can run those rules and prove that they've been run in that way. You don't have to rely on a third-party company, and you can do so in a very, very cheap and effective and fast way. That's all that it means.
Okay, so can you give me a little example then of two companies, maybe one in California, one in Europe, and how does it, very simplistically, the sort of these tokens, how they get used and moved around, and what sort of information you'd expect to see in them?
Yeah, so it's quite simple, right? So let's say that I have a really simple let's say that I have a program that I write, and it says hey, I'd like to allow the transfer of this of this document, of this digital document between two people. I'm going to install it on the network. And now what happens is if I decide to transfer that token to yourself, then I can show you that on the network itself, I can sign a digital message and show you that that's occurred. And you don't have to check with me. You don't have to check with a third company. You yourself can run that program and prove, yeah, this event did occur. So a good example that we've seen is we've actually been talking to the U.S. Department of Commerce about this exact issue with the certificate of origin. Now, the concept that we've had is quite simple. They're using traditional database, infrastructure. It's costing a ton of money. They're charging a ton of money for it. And frankly, it's not secure. It's subject to forgeries. People don't want to do it because of the cost. It's complex. It requires third-party companies. A blockchain can come in and take that entire concept, write a program, install it in the network, and now the Department of Commerce can run that software without a single machine because it's not run on their network. No, it's run on the blockchain. So their costs could effectively go to zero, number one. Then for the people that are trying to use that network to issue that document and verify that document, it can all be done with complete assurance. There's no longer this need for oh, who do I have to check on this with? I can check myself or with a third-party company that I trust, and using a blockchain that can be done very, very cheaply and effectively.
Okay, all right. That's very helpful. Alicia, electronic bills of lading are just sort of one of a number of negotiable trade documents. What do you see the future? How do you see that, if you like, other negotiable trade documents? If you had to sort of peek into the future as we're coming up towards the end of 2024, what are we likely to see coming down the line over the next year or so?
Well, I think the Electronic Trade Document Act already gives some clues about what are potential next steps after the electronic bill of lading. Me personally, I think the most promising one is but that is because also I'm a supply chain person. So the inventory receipt, basically being a document that is where a logistics service provider or warehouse operator basically provides proof that goods have been stored under his roof, that they have been in good condition, etc. As such, they would be just as like a bill of lading, because a bill of lading is basically a shipping line saying that the cargo is under his roof. Well, boat doesn't have a roof, but it's similar in concept. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there also to extend the financing within the supply chain to incorporate inventory being stored in warehouses.
And do you see other technologies like IoT, Internet of Things? Do you see that integrating with blockchain so that you won't need a warehouse operator to say it's arrived? Effectively, a little widget within the container will say it's arrived or it's left. So we'll automate.
That's a perfect example. I mean, one of the things that you could think about is that, this is an anecdote, but a couple of years ago there were small copper, like pieces of copper. They were basically bricks, but painted in the color of copper, stored inside of a container. They took pictures and said, this is real copper, and from a picture it looked like copper, but you could basically build an IoT device that could sense and check the air inside of a container.
Yep.
And I'm 100% sure that copper has a different way of breathing than bricks. So although it may not know that it is bricks, it will definitely say this is not copper. Right. And this would potentially then invalidate, for example, a contract.
Yeah.
Those kind of conditions and integration of different technologies, IoT, but also artificial intelligence and blockchain, I think that is now starting to come together with all the technologies becoming much more mature.
Yeah. Okay. And Julian, what if you could sum up Stability, because with respect, there's lots of blockchains, but what would you say your mission is? What's the USP, the unique selling proposition of Stability? How would you sum it up for us?
We're a really simple concept. All that we're doing is attempting to make blockchain as accessible as possible to businesses and companies that are out there. And we do that by removing transaction fees. So it is not required to pay a transaction fee to use our network. So because of that, we have a very, very large capacity, extremely high capacity, no cost. That does also eliminate a lot of the regulatory risk typically from a company using a network. So typically there's 3 people within a company that kills blockchain as a tech, right? It's your CFO saying this costs too much. It's your GC saying this isn't legal, and it's your CTO saying this is too complex to install, right? So those are the things that we focus on getting past. And so for those things, we've removed the cryptocurrency. This makes it so there's nothing required necessarily to install. You can actually just use it natively. Obviously no regulatory and obviously no cost constraint there. So we tend to operate a little bit like I kind of prefer to liken it to a Red Hat. It's free, public, and open source to use as your business would scale.
Hang on.
And you want to
What's Red Hat? I thought that's something that Dr. Zeus used to wear.
Yeah, Red Hat is the most ubiquitous server software on earth today. Like every major enterprise is going to run an instance of Red Hat in their servers, and it's actually completely free. But if you want service and support, you would go to IBM and pay for that. We liken ourselves to a Red Hat. Free to use. You want service and support, you want an SLA, you can come to us, and that's where we step in.
Okay, so that was going to my next question, because you're not doing it for love. You've got some clever tech, but if they can use it, and if they can use it, they don't need support. But if they want support integrating or developing it, then that's where you'd come in and help them to really define it and refine it to their particular use case.
Well, you guys were having a really interesting conversation about IoT, right? And this is exactly where my mind's at as well, is that blockchains become more valuable the more that they're used. They become more effective the more that they're used.
Absolutely.
So we as a tech sector need to encourage usage. So we need to remove these dependencies and barriers, because just as I said before, if a token is a program that's installed on the network, if you can get more data on the network through an IoT device, that program can now interact with it directly. And you can now use that data in a very secure and reliable way that you couldn't before. And so our focus continues to be, how do we move from this pay per minute ancient dial-up concept where I'm trying to think about what do I want to do when I log into the World Wide Web, to broadband. I have as much space as I need. I'm going to do whatever I need to do on this network.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what I found really interesting is we got an American company and we got a European company using a technology which is not in one location, it's decentralized. Before we go, it'd be great. How do people find out more information about Stability? And Julian, perhaps you can just tell us how do we get in touch with you if people want more information about what your company does and some of the things we touched on today? Is LinkedIn the best bet?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is really the best bet. So you can find us on LinkedIn. We're called Stability Protocol. Pretty simple to find us. It's a Q logo.
All right, Q logo, Stability Protocol, and it's Julian. That's Juliun, no A.
Yep.
Not a lot. A. You substituted the A for the U, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And it's Brabon, Brabon. And Alicia, I can't pronounce your surname, absolutely a nightmare. But you're with Doc Lab, and
I'm with Doc Lab, and my first name is Aljosja. My last name is Bijen, but there's only one person guaranteed on this planet with that first and last name, so I'm unique in that sense. So easy to find.
Okay, and that is Aljosja.
Correct.
And Beije.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, I can still read. That's good. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us on the Two Tokens podcast. It'd be great to get you back, perhaps in a couple of months, because I know you're working on some projects together, and give us an update on the learnings and the real challenges you're solving. But thank you for joining us today, and thank you for listening to the Two Tokens podcast.
That was it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening in, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find our contact details at www.twotokens.org.